to talk today about revitalizing local churches because, truthfully, we're not going to be able to plant new, nor are we going to be able to continue to have a significant missions force around the world unless our existing churches are strong and those that are struggling could be revitalized. Now, Brian, you and I have talked enough about this that I know this is a passion for yours and something you care about. As you've come into your role in the district, tell me a little bit, what's your heart and your perspective on this idea of church revitalization?
Well, thanks, Kevin. You know, it's interesting. As I came to the North Central District, some things were clear to me. On the one hand, every church in our family matters no matter where it's at. Mm-hmm. And so it can be tempting in these revitalization conversations. We start to sound like there are winners and losers, and that's not how this family works. And so as we think about revitalizing our churches, we don't want it to sound like that. That's super important to us. Right. But another thing was pretty clear to me. We spent a lot of energy in the EFCA figuring out how to plant churches. Mm-hmm. And while we're not perfect at it, we don't enter the project wondering how we should start. Yeah. Likewise, if a church loses its lead pastor, we spent a lot of energy knowing how to revitalize from that point forward. Right. Something that was clear to me is that in the messy middle, we didn't have a real clear sense of how to revitalize or even why to revitalize or even when to revitalize. And so as I came into this position, it was clear to me that we needed to figure out a great process and plan for how to bring life and vibrant ministry to churches that felt like they were stuck or stagnant. And the reason I think, on the one hand, is because, of course, the church is the center of God's work in this world, and we need these churches to be strong. But there's another reason for me, and it's the stewardship reason. Free Church people have been building churches for generations, and it's being handed to a new generation of leadership as a trust. Mm-hmm. And we can do a lot of things with that trust. And my sense is we need to do our very best to get it back on gospel-shaped mission so that we can reach the lost and shepherd the found, like we have been in all these places for all these years. Yeah.
Well, and recognizing that studies that have been done across the country would tell us that roughly 6 in 10 churches are either plateaued or in some level of decline, and wanting to steward them well. And part of that stewardship is certainly a stewardship of resources, but part of that stewardship is a stewardship of history. And understanding gospel ministry that's gone on a long time that we want to continue to see grow. And you know, Brent, that brings me to where you stepped in, because a year and a half or so ago, you and Sarah and your family moved from San Francisco to Hastings, Minnesota, to step into leadership in a church that when you came was about 25% of the size it was at the high point in the life of the church. They'd been through some difficulties. What's it been like for you coming and knowing this is a revitalization, and what have been some of the key things you've learned?
Yeah, it's an environment and it's an opportunity where I know that leaders who come in and see an opportunity for revitalization or see a church that's in need of a turnaround can be really motivated and really driven, and yet it's an environment where there can be a lot of hurt and a lot of pain and a lot of difficult stories in the past. And so one of the things I've learned and I tried to embody right away was to come in and immediately let everyone know that I was there primarily to love them and not to change them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was key because you have to build trust. And I especially realized that as a revitalizer of a church, there is a key component of it is generational bridge building and trust. And it was something that people recognized. I had some mentors as I was preparing for ministry and then going through seminary and then in the church planting processes that we had done in the past, who said that we recognize you have a gift for reaching and building trust with multiple generations, young and old. Mm-hmm. And as a revitalization of a church goes, being able to cross various boundaries and be able to speak to people in multiple generations is key. So I'm learning to come in to genuinely love people, to build trust, and to be able to celebrate the past and give a clear vision for the future that primarily comes out of care for the people and motivation for the mission that God has for the church.
Now, Brian, one of the questions, none of us would argue in EFCA that revitalizing churches is important. Mm-hmm. The question really becomes how. Yeah. I mean, what things have you learned on the sort of how do we do this? Yeah. And you're walking alongside Brent and others that are trying to walk this road. What have you learned?
Well, it's interesting. There's the playbook way, and maybe I'll talk about that in a second. But then the other way is sort of the watching the work of God and sort of jumping in way. And Brent's story is more that second story. You know, on the one hand, there was this beautiful church that had this amazing legacy of sending out leaders. In fact, they sent so many leaders out of their church that they were struggling a little bit as a church. They were never happier than when they were sending someone else to serve somewhere else instead of right there. And when we came to this point of thinking about what their next step was, I remember I spent some time listening to those leaders and hearing their hearts, and then thinking, who did I know that would be like that? And Brent was actually an example. I told them they probably wouldn't be able to hire, but maybe a guy like Brent. And it was interesting, the providence of God in bringing a person that embodied a couple of their really key heart values, coupled with an attitude of coming in and listening and not saying, I'm going to take this church and turn them into what I want, but rather take these people and help these people in this place get on their mission again and have that mission be restored. That was a powerful thing in the process.
Now, Brent, you've been working with Brian, and I want to tie this up a little bit by simply saying, how has the district, your district superintendent, pastors around you, how have they encouraged you in this journey in the last year and a half?
Yeah, that's a great question. I felt a lot of support and encouragement. And one of the things that's key, especially when you move across the country or if you come to a new city and you're starting in a new ministry, and this is for someone who's going into a church that's not necessarily revitalization, but it's a similar thing, to have a network of other leaders and pastors that are supportive and encouraging and help you bounce ideas and questions, and to learn the context and the people and the community is really important.
In listening to Brent talk about how the district came alongside him for revitalization, it was encouraging to me to hear you share about those things. It reminded me of things we hold pretty dear. One of the things we hold super dear is we don't come to our churches saying we're going to fix you. We say we're going to help you. We want to walk alongside you. And it's super important that our churches know in a situation like this, it's easy for leaders like us to come with a strong agenda.
Sure.
But what we say is your agenda is our agenda. We don't come with agenda other than the big, beautiful, bold gospel agenda of reaching the lost, of shepherding the found, of helping the church be strong where it's struggling, helping the church be present where it doesn't exist, and helping it to multiply all over the place. That's what we're trying to accomplish.
And Brian and Brent, that's really living out our mission statement, that God would be glorified as we would see transformational churches planted among all people. And that is strengthening, revitalizing, and planting, and doing it together. Thanks for coming and sharing your hearts, because what you've shared resonates so much, I know, with me and with others. And my hope is that we would see pastors and leaders who might be struggling reach out to their district superintendents. Brian, I know you and your colleagues around the country would love to help. And as Brent said, there are clusters of pastors around the country, and the opportunity for you, if you're a pastor in a really healthy church, look for someone that you might be able to come alongside to encourage them, because that encouragement and help helps us to walk it all together. And I really pray God would be glorified through more of what you were talking about today to strengthen and revitalize free churches all across the country.